My name is Arjun, and my wife, Anaya, and I have been married for 5 years. Our relationship has always been strong, or so I thought. Anaya is a successful marketing manager at a prestigious firm. She's ambitious, driven, and has always had a knack for climbing the corporate ladder. We met in college, and from the moment we started dating, I knew she was someone special. Her passion and dedication were inspiring. About a year ago, Anaya started talking a lot about her boss, Mateo. At first, it didn't bother me. Mateo was the CEO of her company, and she often spoke about him in glowing terms. He was charismatic, intelligent, and had a reputation for being a visionary leader. Anaya admired him greatly, and it seemed natural that she would mention him often given her career aspirations. Mateo was known for his demanding nature but also for recognizing and rewarding hard work. Anaya spent long hours at the office, often coming home late and exhausted. She assured me it was just the nature of her job, and I believed her. After all, she had always been committed to her work. As time went on, Anaya and Mateo began working more closely on important projects. She would sometimes stay overnight at the office, claiming they were burning the midnight oil to meet tight deadlines. I trusted her completely, never once doubting her explanations. I was proud of her accomplishments and supported her ambitions. One evening, Anaya came home looking more radiant than usual. She told me that Mateo had given her a significant promotion. She was now one of the top executives in the company. We celebrated her success, and I couldn't have been happier for her. It seemed like all her hard work was finally paying off. However, things started to change. Anaya became more distant, often lost in her thoughts. She was preoccupied, and our conversations became increasingly superficial. I attributed it to the stress of her new role and tried to be as supportive as possible. Then, one night, everything changed. Anaya had been working late again, and when she finally came home, she was unusually quiet. I asked her if everything was okay, and she assured me it was just a tough day at work. But something felt off. Weeks passed, and Anaya's behavior grew more erratic. She was secretive with her phone and seemed to be hiding something. My suspicions grew, but I didn't want to confront her without any proof. I loved her deeply and didn't want to believe she could betray me. The rest of the story will be told by my wife, which is what I found out after the fact.
I knew something was wrong the moment I missed my period. At first, I tried to dismiss it as stress from work, but when the second month passed without any sign, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I bought a pregnancy test on my way home from work, my hands trembling as I paid for it. When I saw the positive result, I felt a rush of emotions, fear, confusion, and a faint glimmer of hope. I didn't know what to do. I was scared out of my mind. I knew the baby couldn't be yours, and the guilt was eating me alive. The only person I could think of to turn to was Mateo. After all, he was the father. I hoped, maybe naively, that he would support me, that we could figure something out together. The next day, I mustered all my courage and asked Mateo to meet me after work. We went to a small, quiet cafe where no one from the office would see us. I could barely keep myself together as I told him I was pregnant. His reaction was nothing like what I expected. Mateo's face turned cold, his usual charm replaced by a hard, unyielding stare. He leaned back in his chair and said, "I can't have a child right now, Anaya. This isn't part of my plan, and I certainly don't need this trouble. You're on your own with this one." I felt like I had been punched in the gut. I couldn't believe it. This was the man I had risked everything for, and he was abandoning me in my moment of need. I begged him to reconsider, but he was firm. He got up, tossed some money on the table for the drinks, and walked out, leaving me sitting there, stunned and broken. I sat in that cafe for what felt like hours, trying to gather my thoughts. I felt completely alone and didn't know what to do next. The only thing I could think about was you, Arjun. I knew that if you found out the truth, it would destroy you, destroy us. But I also knew I couldn't hide the pregnancy forever. That's when I came up with an idea, a desperate plan that I thought might save our marriage and my life. I knew it was risky, but I couldn't see any other way out. I decided to go to my doctor and ask for her help. After Mateo abandoned me, I felt utterly lost. The fear of losing you was overwhelming. I knew I had to come up with a plan quickly. The idea I had was risky and morally wrong, but I was desperate. I decided to go to my Dr. Patel. and ask for his help in convincing you that the baby was yours. The next day, I made an appointment with Dr. Patel. He had been our family doctor for years, and I hoped he would be sympathetic to my situation. When I walked into his office, I could barely keep my composure. I explained my predicament to him, omitting the details about the affair, and told him I needed him to convince you that the baby was yours. Dr. Patel looked at me with a mix of shock and disapproval. He was a man of integrity, and I could see the conflict in his eyes. "Ania," he said, "I can't lie to your husband. It's unethical and could cost me my medical license." I was desperate. I begged and pleaded with him, telling him how my marriage and my life were at stake. But he remained firm, shaking his head. I felt like my last hope was slipping away. Then, in a moment of desperation, I offered him money. I knew it was wrong, but I didn't see any other way. I promised to pay him a substantial amount if he would just tell you that the baby was yours. There was a long, agonizing pause as he considered my offer. Finally, with a heavy sigh, he agreed. I could see the reluctance in his eyes, but he nodded and said, "All right, Ania, I'll do it, but you have to understand, this goes against everything I believe in." I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I thanked him profusely and promised to make the payment as soon as possible. As I left his office, a small part of me felt guilty for what I had done, but the overwhelming feeling was one of relief. I believed that everything would be fine now, that we could move forward without you ever finding out the truth. That evening, I came home and found you in the living room, watching TV. My heart was pounding as I sat down next to you. "Arjun," I began, trying to keep my voice steady, "I have some wonderful news. I'm pregnant." Your face lit up with joy, and you pulled me into a tight embrace. I felt a surge of guilt, but I pushed it aside, telling myself that this was for the best. We celebrated the news together, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of hope. I believed that we could get through this, that our love would carry us through.
When Anaya told me about the pregnancy, I was overjoyed. I had always wanted to be a father, and the news filled me with a happiness I hadn't felt in a long time. We celebrated that night, and for a while, everything seemed perfect. I didn't suspect a thing. But as time went on, small things started to bother me. Anaya was often distant, lost in her thoughts. She was more protective of her phone, and there were times when she seemed to be hiding something. I tried to ignore these feelings, but they gnawed at me, growing stronger each day. One evening, I couldn't hold it in any longer. I confronted Anaya, my heart pounding. "Anaya," I said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Have you been cheating on me?" Her face turned pale, and for a moment, I saw a flash of panic in her eyes, but she quickly composed herself and responded, "Arjun, how could you even think that? I would never do something like that to you." I wanted to believe her. I loved her, and the thought of her betrayal was unbearable, but the doubts persisted. "I don't want to think it," I said, "but things have been off lately. I need to be sure. I'm going to the doctor to make sure I'm the father of this baby." Anaya's eyes widened, and she reached out to grab my hand. "Please, Arjun, you have to trust me. I would never hurt you like that. You know I love you." Despite her reassurances, I couldn't shake the nagging suspicion. I needed to know the truth, so I went to Dr. Patel's office the next day. When I told him my concerns, he looked at me with a mixture of pity and professionalism. "Arjun, I understand your concerns," he said, "but I can assure you, the baby is yours." He showed me the results of a paternity test, which confirmed that I was indeed the father. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. How could I have doubted Anaya? I felt ashamed for ever suspecting her. When I got home, I found Anaya in the living room, anxiously waiting for me. I pulled her into a tight embrace. "I'm so sorry, Anaya," I whispered. "I was wrong to doubt you." The doctor confirmed it. "The baby is mine." Tears welled up in her eyes as she hugged me back. "I understand, Arjun. I'm just glad we can put this behind us now." We held each other for a long time, and I promised myself that I would never let my doubts come between us again. Little did I know, the truth was far more complicated than I could have ever imagined. The next few months were some of the happiest times of my life. Anaya and I prepared eagerly for the arrival of our child, decorating the nursery, buying tiny clothes, and dreaming about our future as a family. Every kick, every ultrasound brought us closer together, and I felt an overwhelming sense of joy and anticipation. We attended prenatal classes together, and I was there for every doctor's appointment, holding Anaya's hand and marveling at the miracle growing inside her. We picked out names, argued playfully over the best stroller, and spent countless nights talking about the kind of parents we wanted to be. Our friends and family were equally excited. We hosted a baby shower where Anaya glowed with happiness. Surrounded by loved ones who showered her with gifts and good wishes, I felt like the luckiest man alive, about to become a father with the woman I loved by my side. But one day, everything changed. I was at work when I received an unexpected phone call from Dr. Patel. His voice was serious, and I could sense something was wrong. "Arjun, we need to meet," he said, his tone leaving no room for doubt. "It's very important." My heart sank. I couldn't imagine what could be so urgent, but the worry in his voice made my mind race with possibilities. I agreed to meet him that afternoon, my thoughts spinning with anxiety and fear. As I hung up the phone, a chill ran down my spine. I had no idea what Dr. Patel wanted to tell me, but I knew it was going to change everything. As I walked into Dr. Patel's office that afternoon, my heart pounded with a mixture of fear and anticipation. The doctor's usually warm demeanor was replaced with a serious, almost sorrowful expression. "Arjun, please sit down," Dr. Patel began, gesturing to a chair. I could feel the weight of his words before he even spoke them. "There's something you need to know, something I should have told you a long time ago." I sat there, my mind racing. "What is it, Dr. Patel?" He took a deep breath and looked me straight in the eye. "Anaya came to me months ago and asked me to lie to you. She was desperate, and I, unfortunately, succumbed to her pressure and a financial bribe. The baby Anaya is carrying is not yours. It's her boss's, Mateo's." The world seemed to collapse around me. I felt like I had been punched in the gut, the air knocked out of me. "What?" I managed to choke out, my voice trembling with shock and rage. "I'm so sorry, Arjun," Dr. Patel continued. "I deeply regret my actions, and I understand if you never want to speak to me again, but I couldn't live with myself any longer. You deserve to know the truth." My mind swirled with anger and betrayal. The first thing that came to mind was confronting Mateo, the man who had not only had an affair with my wife but also abandoned her and their unborn child. The thought of him made my blood boil. I stormed out of the doctor's office, my fists clenched and my jaw tight. I drove straight to Mateo's office, fueled by a blind rage. I didn't care about the consequences. I needed to confront him. When I arrived at his office, I barged in, ignoring the receptionist's protests. Mateo looked up, surprised to see me. Before he could utter a word, I grabbed him by the collar and slammed him against the wall. "You ruined my life," I shouted, my voice shaking with fury. "You had an affair with my wife and left her when she needed you the most. How could you do this to us?" Mateo struggled against my grip, but I didn't let go. His face turned red, and he finally managed to speak. "Arjun, I'm sorry. I never meant for this to happen." His apology only fueled my anger. I wanted to hurt him, to make him feel the pain I was feeling. But as I stood there, holding him against the wall, I realized that physically hurting him wouldn't change anything. It wouldn't take away the betrayal or the lies. I released him and stepped back, my chest heaving with anger and frustration. "You're not worth it," I spat, turning on my heel and leaving his office. As I drove home, my mind was a whirlwind of emotions. I couldn't believe the extent of the betrayal. Anaya had lied to me, manipulated me, and involved others in her deceit. But I couldn't confront her just yet. I needed to figure out how to get back at her, to make her feel the same pain she had caused me. I decided to play along for now, pretending I was still the blissfully unaware husband, until I could come up with a plan to exact my revenge. Over the next few days, I struggled to keep up the facade of a loving, unsuspecting husband. Every time I looked at Anaya, I felt a surge of anger and betrayal, but I knew I had to bide my time and plan my revenge carefully. One evening, as we sat together in the living room, I turned to Anaya with a smile. "You know," I said, "we should celebrate this pregnancy properly. Let's throw a party and invite all our friends and family. It's a big moment for us, and everyone should share in our joy." Anaya's face lit up with excitement. "That's a wonderful idea. Arjun, I would love to have a party and tell everyone the good news." I smiled back at her, masking my true intentions. "Great. Let's plan it for next weekend. We can have everyone over, and you can make the big announcement." Over the next week, we worked together to organize the party. Anaya was thrilled, and seeing her so happy only strengthened my resolve. I was going to expose her deceit in front of everyone she cared about, and she would finally understand the pain she had caused me. The day of the party arrived, and our house was filled with the laughter and chatter of our friends and family. Everyone was eager to celebrate the impending arrival of our child. Anaya was glowing with happiness, completely unaware of what was about to unfold. As the evening progressed, I could see Anaya becoming more and more excited. Finally, she took my hand and led me to the center of the room. "Everyone, can I have your attention, please?" she called out, her voice filled with joy. The room fell silent, and all eyes turned to us. Anaya beamed at the crowd. "Arjun and I have some wonderful news to share. We're expecting a baby!" There were cheers and applause, and Anaya looked at me, her eyes sparkling with happiness. It was my cue. I took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Thank you, everyone, for being here to celebrate with us. There's something else I need to share, though, something important." The room grew quiet again, and I could feel the tension building. You see, while Anaya and I are indeed expecting a child, there's a truth that needs to be told. This baby is not mine. Gasps of shock and disbelief rippled through the crowd. Anaya's face went pale, and she turned to me, her eyes wide with fear. "Arjun, what are you saying?" I looked directly at her, my voice steady. "I'm saying that this child is not mine. Anaya had an affair with her boss, Mateo. She lied to me, lied to all of us. She even bribed our doctor to cover it up." The room erupted in whispers and exclamations. Anaya's face crumbled as the reality of her actions hit her. "Arjun, please," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. I held my ground, feeling a mix of satisfaction and sadness. "I trusted you, Anaya. I loved you, but you betrayed me in the worst possible way. Now everyone knows the truth." With that, I walked away, leaving her to face the consequences of her actions. The party, meant to celebrate new life, had instead become the stage for the unraveling of our lives. The pain in Anaya's eyes mirrored my own, but I couldn't bring myself to feel sympathy. She had made her choices, and now she had to live with them. The room was a cacophony of shocked voices and hushed whispers as I left Anaya standing there, her world crumbling around her. I walked out of the house, needing to clear my head, needing to escape the chaos I had just unleashed. I wandered the streets for what felt like hours, the cool evening air doing little to calm the storm of emotions raging inside me. I had exposed Anaya's betrayal to everyone, but the satisfaction I had anticipated was quickly fading, replaced by an overwhelming sense of loss and emptiness. Eventually, I found myself at a small park where Anaya and I used to go during happier times. I sat on a bench, staring blankly at the playground where we had once talked about our future, about children and growing old together. It all felt so distant now. As the night grew darker, I knew I had to face the aftermath. I headed back home, bracing myself for what I might find. When I walked in, the house was eerily quiet. Most of the guests had left, and the few who remained were gathered in small, somber groups, speaking in low tones. Anaya was nowhere to be seen. I found her upstairs, sitting on the edge of our bed, her face streaked with tears. She looked up as I entered, her eyes red and swollen. "Arjun," she began, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry. I never meant for things to get this far. I was scared and made terrible choices. Please, believe me." I stood there, torn between the love I still felt for her and the betrayal that had shattered my trust. "Anaya," I said, my voice heavy with emotion, "I don't know if I can ever forgive you for what you've done. You broke our marriage, our trust. How could you lie to me like that?" She sobbed, burying her face in her hands. "I know, and I regret it every single day, but I love you. Arjun, I want to make this right, somehow." I sighed, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on me. "I need time. Anaya, I don't know what the future holds for us, but right now, I need to figure out how to move forward." We spent the next few weeks living in a tense, uneasy truce. Anaya moved into the guest room, and we communicated only when necessary. The silence between us was deafening, filled with all the things left unsaid. One day, I received a letter from Dr. Patel. He had resigned from his practice and moved out of town, unable to live with the guilt of his actions. It was a small consolation, but it did little to ease the pain. As the weeks turned into months, I slowly began to rebuild my life. I sought therapy to help process the trauma and started focusing on my career and hobbies. Anaya and I remained distant, coexisting in the same house but living separate lives. One evening, Anaya approached me, holding an envelope. Arjun, I know I've lost your trust, and I understand if you never want to be with me again, but I want you to have this, she said, handing me the envelope. Inside was a signed letter, relinquishing any claim to our home and assets. It's the least I can do after everything I've put you through, she said, her voice trembling. I hope someday you can find it in your heart to forgive me. I looked at the letter, then back at her. Thank you, Anaya. I don't know what the future holds, but I hope we can both find some peace and happiness. She nodded, tears in her eyes. I hope so too, Arjun. As I watched her walk away, I realized that while the pain of her betrayal would never fully disappear, I had the strength to move forward. Life would never be the same, but I was determined to rebuild and find a new path. One step at a time,